January 3rd, 1946. A cold London morning. Inside Wandsworth prison, a man walks his final steps toward the gallows. His crime? Broadcasting Nazi poison into British homes for 6 long years. His punishment? Death by hanging. This is the shocking tale of William Joyce, the voice that earned the nickname Lord Haw-Haw, and how Britain's most despised traitor met his brutal end. But before we dive into this dark chapter of history, welcome to Timeless World, where we uncover the most gripping, untold stories from our past. If you're fascinated by history's most controversial figures and shocking true events, smash that subscribe button right now and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's explore the twisted journey of the man who betrayed an entire nation. The making of a traitor. William Brooke Joyce entered the world on April 24, 1906, in Brooklyn, New York. Born to a naturalized American father of Irish descent and an Anglo-Irish mother from a prosperous family, his early years seemed unremarkable. But destiny had darker plans. When Joyce was barely 3 years old, his family relocated across the Atlantic to Ireland, where the seeds of his extremist ideology would eventually take root. The Irish War of Independence became Joyce's baptism by fire. At just 15 years old, he found himself recruited by British forces, operating as a courier during one of Ireland's bloodiest conflicts. The violence surrounding him became personal when, allegedly, IRA fighters attempted to assassinate the teenage Joyce on his walk home from school. The close brush with death forced his family to make a desperate decision. They shipped him to safety in Worcestershire, England, where he would continue his education far from Ireland's battlegrounds. University life transformed Joyce in ways nobody could have predicted. While studying, he became consumed by fascist ideology, devouring extremist literature and attending radical political gatherings. His commitment to these dangerous beliefs would soon be written in blood, literally. During a political rally supporting a conservative candidate in Lambeth North, communist protesters attacked Joyce. A razor blade sliced across his face, carving a grotesque scar that stretched from his earlobe to the corner of his mouth. This disfigurement became his permanent mark, a physical manifestation of the violent ideology he embraced. The scar didn't slow him down. Joyce climbed the ranks of Britain's fascist underground, joining Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists in 1932. His oratory skills were magnetic and terrifying. Witnesses described him as thin, pale, intense, a man whose dynamic force and vitriolic speeches could electrify audiences within minutes of opening his mouth. By 1934, Joyce had risen to become the BUF's director of propaganda. But internal conflicts shattered Joyce's fascist dreams. In 1937, Mosley expelled him from the organization. Bitter and enraged, Joyce formed his own splinter group, the National Socialist League. However, as war clouds gathered over Europe, Joyce's followers abandoned him, choosing Hitler's Germany over Joyce's British version of Nazism. Heartbroken and increasingly alcoholic, Joyce watched his movement crumble. Then came his fateful decision. In late August 1939, with war imminent and British authorities closing in, Joyce made his escape. He fled to Berlin, arriving in Nazi Germany just days before Hitler's invasion of Poland triggered World War II. It was a one-way ticket to infamy. Germany calling. The voice of evil. Berlin welcomed Joyce with open arms. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's sinister minister of propaganda, recognized Joyce's potential immediately. Just 3 days after Britain declared war on Germany, on September 6, 1939, Joyce delivered his first English-language news broadcast. By September 18th, he had secured a formal contract. His program, titled Germany Calling, was designed to penetrate British homes and poison British minds. Joyce's mission was crystal clear: convince the British working class that they were being exploited by a conspiracy between Jewish businessmen and the privileged elite who controlled the government. His broadcasts urged surrender, threatened invasion, and painted Nazi Germany as Britain's inevitable conqueror. The content was venomous, filled with exaggerations, outright lies, and psychological warfare designed to shatter British morale. Yet, something unexpected happened. British audiences began tuning in, not because they believed the propaganda, but because they found Joyce's broadcasts darkly entertaining. His peculiar, exaggerated upper-class accent earned him the mocking nickname Lord Haw-Haw. At the height of his influence in 1940, Joyce commanded an astonishing audience: 6 million regular listeners and 18 million occasional listeners across the United Kingdom. Why did people listen? Information during wartime was heavily censored. Families desperate for news about loved ones serving abroad turned to Joyce's broadcasts, hoping to catch scraps of information about prisoners of war or casualties. Allied soldiers also tuned in, searching for clues about the fate of bomber crews shot down over Germany. The British government tried desperately to discourage citizens from listening, but the forbidding nature of Joyce's program only increased its appeal. Joyce's propaganda work extended beyond broadcasting. He wrote articles aimed at prisoners of war, attempting to recruit them into the British Free Corps, a unit within the Waffen-SS composed of British traitors. In 1941, he published Twilight Over England, a propaganda book that portrayed Britain as a dystopia and Nazi Germany as a paradise. Hitler himself recognized Joyce's contributions, awarding him the War Merit Cross First Class. As the war turned against Germany, Joyce's broadcasts grew increasingly desperate. Allied bombing campaigns reduced German cities to rubble. Joyce's tone shifted from threatening to defensive, from confident to downtrodden. The final broadcast and capture. April 30th, 1945. Berlin was falling. Soviet troops fought block by block through the burning capital. In Hamburg, William Joyce stumbled to the microphone for his final broadcast, clearly intoxicated. His words slurred together as he rambled incoherently about how the Soviet Red Army couldn't be trusted, how the war could have been avoided, and how England and Germany should have been allies. His voice, once sharp and commanding, now sounded pathetic and defeated. He closed with a final Hail Hitler, then bid his listeners farewell. Hours later, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker. The Hamburg radio station fell to Allied forces the next day. Joyce and his wife fled north to Flensburg, near the Danish border, where Admiral Dönitz had established a short-lived Nazi government after Hitler's death. Joyce had planned to escape to neutral Sweden, but for reasons unknown, he chose to stay. For 2 weeks, the couple lived with a British widow in a small village, hoping to remain undetected. But British intelligence and MI5 were hunting him relentlessly. A specialized military unit called T-Force, experts in tracking down war criminals, had Joyce on their priority list. May 28, 1945, Joyce decided to venture into the village of Coopermulet to buy food. That afternoon, he took a solid walk through nearby woods. As he returned along a forest road, 2 British intelligence officers spotted him. Joyce panicked and attempted to speak French, hoping to disguise his identity. But one of the soldiers recognized that voice, the same voice that had invaded British homes for 6 years. When Joyce reached into his pocket, possibly for forged identification papers, Lieutenant Geoffrey Perry, ironically a Jewish Jew fighting for Britain, fired his pistol. The bullet struck Joyce, wounding but not killing him. Searched and subdued,
true identity papers were discovered. The most notorious voice of Nazi propaganda was captured. Joyce was transported to a British military hospital, then sent to London to face justice. The trial. Legal controversy. Joyce's trial at London's Old Bailey became one of the most legally controversial cases in British history. He faced 3 separate charges of high treason. But there was a fundamental problem. William Joyce had never actually been a British citizen. His defense team argued this vigorously. Joyce was born in America. He held a fraudulently obtained British passport, but possessed no genuine British nationality. How could a foreigner commit treason against a country to which he owed no allegiance? The prosecution, led by Attorney General Sir Hartley Shawcross, constructed a brilliant counter-argument. They contended that by fraudulently obtaining and holding a British passport between September 18, 1939 and July 2, 1940, Joyce had claimed the protection of the British Crown. Anyone receiving the Crown's protection owed the Crown allegiance. Since Joyce had broadcast Nazi propaganda during this period while holding that passport, he had betrayed the allegiance he claimed. The trial lasted just 3 days. The jury deliberated for a mere 20 minutes before delivering their verdict: guilty. Joyce was acquitted on the first 2 charges, but convicted on the third, that between September 1939 and July 1940, while holding a British passport, he had traitorously adhered to the king's enemies by broadcasting propaganda from Germany. The sentence was death by hanging. Joyce appealed, but the conviction was upheld. According to reports, he wrote, "In death as in life, I defy those who caused this war. I warn the British people against the crushing imperialism of the Soviet Union. May Britain be great once again." January 3, 1946, the final reckoning. The cold morning of January 3, 1946 arrived with grim inevitability. Outside Wandsworth Prison, one of London's largest Victorian institutions, a substantial crowd had gathered. Some came to protest the execution. Others wanted to be as close as possible to witness history, the last execution for treason in Britain. Inside his cell, Joyce woke early. He refused breakfast but accepted a cup of tea. At 1 minute before 9 a.m., an hour later than initially scheduled, the prison governor entered Joyce's cell to inform him that his time had come. The walk was mercifully short. The execution chamber lay just yards away, but Joyce's legs trembled with every step. Albert Pierpoint, Britain's most experienced executioner, waited at the gallows. As Joyce entered the chamber, Pierpoint looked directly into the condemned man's eyes and reportedly heard Joyce's final words: "I think we'd better have this on, you know." Pierpoint moved with practiced efficiency. He placed a black hood over Joyce's head, then positioned the nose around his neck. Joyce stood over the trapdoor, his legs still shaking. Seconds later, Pierpoint pulled the lever. The trapdoor dropped. Joyce's spinal cord snapped instantly. According to witnesses, the scar on his face, that permanent reminder of violence from years earlier, burst open, and blood dripped onto the floor below. At 8 minutes past 9 a.m., William Joyce was dead. A police officer emerged from the prison and pinned the official execution announcement to the gate. Outside, a group of men raised their right arms in a Nazi salute and shouted, "Hail Hitler!" But their gesture was hollow. Their ideology had been crushed. Their champion was dead. Joyce's remains were buried in an unmarked grave within the prison walls. the voice of Lord Haw-Haw had been silenced forever. The legacy of a traitor. William Joyce's execution remains controversial to this day. Unlike many war criminals, Joyce never personally killed anyone. His weapon was his voice, propaganda designed to weaken British resolve. Legal scholars still debate whether the prosecution's argument about passport-based allegiance truly justified a treason conviction against a non-British citizen. What cannot be disputed is Joyce's deliberate choice. He fled to Nazi Germany, aligned himself with Hitler's genocidal regime, and dedicated 6 years to psychological warfare against the Allied forces fighting fascism. He wore the Nazi War Merit Cross with pride. He broadcast until the very last days of the Third Reich, drunk and delusional, still spouting Nazi ideology even as Berlin burned. The story of Lord Haw-Haw serves as a stark reminder of propaganda's power during warfare and the ultimate price of betrayal. Joyce's voice reached millions, but it couldn't change history. The Nazis lost, Britain survived, and the traitor who tried to break British morale with words died with a rope around his neck. This has been Timeless World, bringing you the most compelling and shocking stories from history. If you found William Joyce's story as fascinating and disturbing as we did, show your support by hitting that like button right now. Subscribe to Timeless World so you never miss another incredible historical deep dive. Drop a comment below and tell us, do you think Joyce's execution was justice served, or did the punishment exceed his crimes? We want to hear your thoughts. Share this video with anyone who loves gripping true history. Thanks for watching Timeless World, and we'll see you in the next story.